Hi, welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. My name is Rob Scooter. Thanks for joining me tonight. It is the end of Week 11, Week 12. Just watched the Eagles get dismantle the Dallas Cowboys, and we want to get an early start on the waiver wire video for Week 13. But before we do it, many of you guys know this is our first year. We started this fall, my son and I, and we're pretty excited. We're excited to grow the site, to develop it, and we're doing different things. But we're going to develop it, and we're going to grow it through you guys. We're going to do this through your subscriptions, through click notifications, give us feedback, give us input. There's a lot of things that we want to improve: sound quality, camera quality. But the most important thing that we want to continue to do is bring you kind of to the point, very helpful fantasy football information so that you can go out there and be competitive in your leagues. Once again, we love you guys. We love your support. We're over 500 subscribers. Continue to help us to grow the site and help us to improve our product for you guys. Now, we're going to get into waiver wire pickups for Week 12, some things that we need to consider. Now, right now, it's kind of getting slim pickings out there. It's very difficult, but if you're somebody who's struggling, maybe you have an injury, some other issue going on, you need to pick up a guy out there, or maybe you don't like your matchup. Maybe you're a number one running back, or your quarterback is facing it. For example, the Jaguars, probably don't want to play them. Well, if you're diligent and you work hard, there's always a play out there that we can find for you. Now, one of the things I want to tell you out there is we really try to give you information that's specific to your league, and I can't do that in the videos. We tell you, if you leave comments in the bottom of the video, we'll take your information based on what you give us, and we'll put in the context of your league and answer the best that we can. I think we're pretty good at doing that. One of the things we do want to advise you, though, is on Sunday mornings, I do work from 9 till 12 in the morning. So try to get the comments early. If you leave it too late Sunday morning, I won't be able to answer that for you. And that happened this morning. A couple people made comments. I wasn't able to see it until after the games had started today. So get those comments in early. Another thing I want to get to just briefly is sometimes people ask me, well, why do you talk about players that are available maybe in 20, 30% of leagues? Why aren't you talking about guys available in 80, 90% of leagues? And here's why. I want to give you value, especially this time of year. You're in Week 12 or 13, and many of you out there, you need to win to advance. You need to win to get in the postseason. And so, yeah, I could talk to you a guy like, I could talk to you about the rookie tight end, Ricky Seals-Jones for Arizona. Today he goes out, he has 3 catches, 54 yards, and 2 TDs. But that's the first production he's had all year. You have no body of work to really measure this guy by, and are you going to take 1 week and go ahead and put your trust in this guy in weeks 12 or 13 when you need to win to get in the postseason? Of course, you're not going to do that. So we're going to talk about guys that we know that you can be productive, guys that we feel you can be trusting in, and that's why I give you so many names to consider. If 1 or 2 of these guys are not there, we believe that eventually we're going to mention a name that's out there in your league that you could pick up and you could roll with. And so here we are. We're looking at waiver wire considerations for Week 12, and this is also a great time for you guys to begin to look ahead to the playoffs, weeks 14, 15, and 16. Begin to look at matchups, guys you can pick up, especially when you think about defenses, kickers, things like that. It's really easy to find yourself a good plug and play for the postseason. Some early injury concerns out there. Dante Foreman tore his Achilles, that's the report anyways, and Chris Thompson fractured his fibula. That's unfortunate. He was having a good year. We're hoping the best in his recovery. Calvin Benjamin left injured today. We don't know the extent of that injury. And Jay Cutler had a concussion. Of course, we'll know there'll be some other injuries that will follow the next 2 days. So let's take a look at some waiver wire names that we want you to consider. The first thing we want you to consider is this is a great time of year if you're in a dynasty league to look ahead to next fall. Now, in some leagues, people don't want to leave dead weight on their bench, so when their star got injured, like an Aaron Rodgers or players like that, they'll drop them so they can pick somebody up. They just don't want to leave an injured player on their bench, especially if you're in a league that doesn't allow you an IR. I'm a prime example of that. I'm in a keeper league where I have Deshaun Watson. He was doing great, got hurt, out for the year. Now, I've always had a rule that I live by in fantasy football, especially in dynasty leagues. I won't keep a quarterback going into a new year. I just won't do it. I'd rather put that spot into a running back, a wide receiver, something like that. So I cut Watson. Now, not all of you do that. Many of you will keep a quarterback, and there's a lot of great names out there that have been cut this time of year. You think about Aaron Rodgers, Allen Robinson, Deshaun Watson, Dalvin Cook, Odell Beckham, Andrew Luck, David Johnson. There's just a lot of guys out there. So search your waiver wire if you're in a dynasty league and you never know what you can find out. The guy that you can grab right now, be patient, and come next fall when they're 100%, you look great. So just something to consider right now for waiver wire. Begin to look, if you're in a dynasty league, a keeper league, who's been cut because of injuries, pick them up and stash them for next season. You can build your team and have a great team. So the first running back we want you to consider out there is Samaje Perine. The rookie running back is available in 68% of leagues. Well, Chris Thompson, as we mentioned earlier, has broke his leg. He's out for the year. And Robert Kelly's going to be out for a few more weeks. Now, suddenly he's thrust into the starting role, and suddenly he's relevant as a starter in fantasy football. Now, before today's game, he had struggled all year long. His yards per carry are 3.2. But now he sits at the lead back, and today he surprised a lot of people, myself included. I wasn't big on this guy going into this week. He had 23 carries, 117 yards, and a TD for a yards per carry of 5.1. So this guy went out and he had a great week. Now, I'm not convinced that he's going to continue that sort of production, but in fantasy football, sometimes volume and opportunity trumps talent, meaning you need to find a guy, no matter how talented he is, if he's not getting on the field, if he's not getting his reps, his carries, or his targets, it doesn't matter. Well, right now, Samaje Perine is going to get that volume. He's going to get the carries. He is the lead back, so it's hard to ignore him. This week, he plays the New York Giants, who give the 16 most points to running backs. Once again, I'm not convinced that this guy is going to be the answer. I don't think he's going to go out there and have 100 yards each week, but for some of you out there that are desperate for running backs, he's a guy that you could roll with for the next few weeks who's got some decent plays coming up. Another guy I want to talk about out there is Latavius Murray. But before I do, I want to give a shout out to my Vikings. I'm from Minnesota. I'm a Vikings fan. They went out and they beat the Rams today, moved to 8-2, so I love it. I'm feeling really good about the year. A little nervous about the next 3 games on the road, but hey, one game at a time, as they say, right? So back to Latavius Murray, running back for the Vikings. He's available in 40% of leagues out there. Available once again in 40% of leagues. And he's got a good matchup coming up against Detroit next week, Thursday, Thanksgiving. Detroit gives up the 3rd most points to running backs. And today, Detroit got lit up by Jordan Howard for 125 yards. Murray today looked good again. He had 95 yards and 2 TDs. In fact, that's 4 TDs over the last 4 games. And over the last 6 weeks, his production, his yards per carry, continue to increase. He continues to look more and more effective. And he's had over 15 carries on average the last 6 weeks. So he's a guy that I think you could pick up out there. Now he does lose a few carries to McKinnon, but he's a guy that you definitely can roll out there and feel fairly confident, especially this week against Detroit. A couple other backs we want to talk about is the running back situation. You've got Drake and Williams. And so how does this break down? Well, Drake's available in about 26% of leagues, and Williams available in about 65%. Now, Drake went out this week, and he had a really bad week. He kind of laid the egg in terms of fantasy football. But the 2 previous weeks, he looked really good. And of the 2 running backs, I have to admit, I lean towards Drake. I feel like he's a better running back. He's a better first and second down back in terms of getting the carries and being productive. I see Williams as more of a PPR guy, a guy that uses in 3rd down passing situations. But they're both readily available out there. And now next week they play New England, who gives up the 8th most points to running back. So these are 2 guys that you could roll with. Once again, I feel like Drake is the guy that you're going to roll as kind of a running back, 1 or 2 type of back, whereas Williams is maybe a flex play or somebody that you could put and start in a PPR league. Another guy out there is Alec Collins. We've talked about him quite a bit. He's available in 33% of leagues, and today he finally hit pay dirt, finally got in the end zone, got a touchdown. Now today his yards per carry were down, but he did get 20 carries, so that's good. He's getting volume, he's seeing touches. But I'm not too concerned about today's yards per carry. Today he was down, but if you look at going into this week, his yards per carry for the year were 5.6. And something else that happened today that was surprising and encouraging for him, that he was targeted 7 times in the passing game, and he had 4 catches for 22 yards. And that was an element of the game that he was missing that kind of left him one-dimensional. But if they're going to continue involvement in the passing game, and the fact that he's ran the ball very effectively, he becomes a more relevant back. And that's even more encouraging when you consider the fact that Danny Woodhead came back today. You think that Danny would have got a lot more targets, but once again, they gave Alec Collins 7 targets today and 4 catches. So he's a guy that's out there. Now, he does have a very tough matchup coming up next week. He plays Houston, and Houston gives up the least amount of points to running backs. But for some of you out there, beggars can't be choosers. You need a running back, and he is available. He does have a good Week 13 matchup against Detroit, so you could pick him up now. Maybe not even start him now, but project ahead to Week 13. He has a great matchup there, and Alec Collins available in 33% of leagues. Another guy you want to consider is Powell. He's available in 30% of leagues out there. Now, there are reports coming in that Matt Forte's knee is swollen, and he could be out for a long time, maybe until the end of the year. This, of course, gives a huge boost to Powell, because up to this point, what had hurt him was splitting carries with Forte. Now, the thing I like about Powell, he's very involved in the passing game, so that you can trust him there. He doesn't, if they get blown out or if they fall behind, he stays relevant. And he does have a tough matchup this week coming up. They play Carolina, who gives up the 3rd fewest points to running backs, and Denver. So if you take a look at him, he's going to get some looks, especially with Forte out. He does have a tough schedule coming up against Carolina and Denver. But like we said, for some of you out there that are desperate, he's a guy that you can certainly roll with. Dion Lewis, available in 27% of leagues. Mike Gilsey, 2 weeks in a row now, has been activated. Dion is the lead back there. He's had double-digit carries 5 weeks in a row. He's using the passing game. Today he had a touchdown. Now, this guy has got a very high floor because the offense he plays for, and the fact they move the ball, they're not going to get shut out. He's always going to put up decent numbers. I do think he has a high floor but a lower ceiling, and here's why I think he has a lower ceiling. Because of his size and the fact that New England likes to spread the ball around, they're going to limit his carries. I don't think you're going to see him ever get more than 12 to 15 carries per game. He's not going to be a Jordan Howard type where he's going to get 20, 25, or even 30 carries per game, but he's in a good offense. They involve him in the passing game, and he is the lead back right now. So Dion Lewis is out there in 27% of leagues. You can pick him up. He is their guy from this point going forward unless he does something to lose that job or, God forbid, gets injured. Running back Orleans Darkwa. We've talked about him quite a bit. I think people stay away from him simply because he plays for the Giants. The Giants seem to be a mess, but here's a guy that's available in 30% of leagues also. Now, 3 weeks in a row, he's had over 70 yards rushing, and today he added a touchdown to that. He's the clear-cut lead running back for New York at this point. And he's even mixed in a little bit in the passing game. He's had 2 catches per game in the last 4 games. Now, he's got a tough Washington matchup. Washington is tough against running backs, but after that, it gets a little bit easier. He faces Week 13 Oakland, and Oakland gives up a lot of points to running backs. He's another guy that maybe you don't want to start next week, but you can pick up and start Week 13 if you need to. Here's a name that was huge out there beginning there. People loved him, Tarik Cohen. Early in there, people got excited. We actually FFP here cautioned everybody and said, no, he's not going to take over the lead running backs situation. A lot of people thought that week 1 that was going to be running back by committee. We said that's not going to happen. Jordan Howard is the guy. He's big. He's physical. He outweighs him by 50 pounds. Cohen's not the type of back that's going to run between the tackles. We certainly seem to be right, but he's back on our radar again, and here's why. One, he's available in 54% of leagues. He had a good game today. He had a touchdown. He was involved in the passing game. His value is on the rise again, and the reason why it's on the rise is because Mitch Trubisky is starting to play better. He's starting to move the ball, and as he's becoming more effective, then Cohen becomes more effective. So he's somebody that you could consider, but I would say this, only consider him if you're in a PPR league. If you're not, don't start this guy. Now I want to talk about the Packer running back situation. So Ty Montgomery is out there in 26% of leagues. He's available. Now Aaron Jones is supposed to be out 4 to 6 weeks. Now when Ty Montgomery comes back, he's got he re-injured his ribs, but it sounds like there's a chance he could come back next week in week 12. And when he does, he's going to take over that starting running back position. In fact, he'll be back just in time for fantasy playoffs. So he's out there in 26% of leagues. Don't overlook Ty Montgomery, especially with Aaron Jones out. Currently, they have Jamal Williams running. He's out there in 40% of leagues. Last 2 weeks, he had 20 carries for 67 yards and then 18 for 57. And so he hasn't been extremely effective. In fact, he's been very ineffective. You look, his yards per carry have been 3.26. And he lost the job early in the year to Aaron Jones. So Jamal Williams is not the answer there. He's a guy, if you really have to plug and play him, you can do that. He hasn't looked that great. And so as Ty Montgomery gets back, which will be as soon as next week, Ty Montgomery will be the starter there, and Jamal Williams will be off the bench. What about the Denver running back situation? Well, I tell you what, this one is confusing. I wouldn't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. It's hard to figure out from week to week who's going to be the guy. Devontae Booker looked good today. He was effective. Anderson had a touchdown last week. Charles looked like he was going to be the best. It's a perfect three-way split in terms of carries. This is the true running back by committee, and it's hard to trust any one of them. So at this point, until somebody gets hurt or somebody rises above the other guys, I would stay away from all 3 of those guys. It's just too risky at this point. Kind of a deeper guy to look at out there is Jonathan Stewart. He's available in 64% of leagues. Now, historically, Jonathan Stewart has started slow. That's just always been the way he's been. He picks up the second half of the year. Maybe that would be the case. Last week that he played, he had 17 carries for 110 yards. Another thing that you can trust with this guy, he's had double-digit carries every single game except for one. So he's getting volume, he's getting the carries. He hasn't been terribly effective, but he is available out there in 65% of leagues. Now he plays New York Giants, who give the 12th fewest points to running backs. Can you trust this guy? Well, certainly he's a guy that's at the end of his career. He's getting up there. He's close to 30 at this point. If you look at his yards per carry have dropped last 4 years, he has 4.6 down to 4.1 down to 3.8, and this year a career low of 3.3. So he's worth a fly if you're desperate. If you're very, very desperate, he's a guy that you could certainly put. What I would maybe do if I was you, if you got bench space, pick him up, put on your bench, see how he plays next week or so. Maybe he can get hot and he has the right matchup and you can use him in the playoffs. Here's some quick running back hitters we want to discuss. We're going to keep these very brief because they're not readily available in leagues. They're available in about 50% of leagues out there. Isaiah Crowell is available in 18%. He was playing really well, but today he ran into the Jags. Not surprising, he didn't do much, but nobody does when they play the Jaguars. He should recover next week against Cincinnati. He's a guy that you could pick up in 18% of leagues, Isaiah Crowell. Another guy out there is Frank Gore, available in 30% of leagues. I would stay away from Frank Gore. Hasn't scored since week 2. Has only broke over 50 yards once. I'd rather not go there. If I was you, I'd stay away from him. Doug Martin, available in 14% of leagues. He's been diminishing his value week after week. He's looking worse and worse. In fact, the last 3 games, his yards per carry have been 2.04. He's looking pretty bad. I would not trust Doug Martin. Danny Woodhead, I know there's been a lot of conversation out there. No, he's not going to overtake the running back. In fact, we said that last week. A lot of people asked questions. We said he's not going to become the lead guy. He's going to be a guy at 32 years old, being a smaller back. His skill set is being a wide receiver, a running back out of the backfield who catches the ball in the passing game. That's what he's going to. That's what you're going to see. Is a lot of targets, catches, things like that. He has a little bit of value in PPR leagues. And then Matt Bryant is a guy out there that you want to keep right on. If you're in a dynasty league right now, you can't trust him week to week. But weeks, 15, 16, 17, he's a guy that maybe could get hot and you could project out next year. Rumors is they're not going to bring Carlos Hyde back, but we'll see. So quarterbacks to consider out there. Well, I'm going to talk about some guys. They're not top-end quarterbacks at this point because we assume the top-end quarterbacks are not available in your league and you have them. So we're going to talk about guys that maybe you need to start if you're stuck with an injury, or once again, if your quarterback is playing Jacksonville, or if you're in a league that starts 2 quarterbacks. So here's some of these deeper ones, a little bit lower down the list that you consider. First one is Andy Dalton. He plays Cleveland, who gives up the 10th most points to quarterbacks. Now, Andy's actually been playing better since week 2. The first 2 weeks, he looked brutal. I actually had him in week 1 in a league, but Carson Wentz got dropped. Can you believe it? Carson Wentz got dropped in a keeper league I'm involved in, so I picked him up. I've been great since. But since week 2, Andy Dalton has played really well. In fact, if you look at his touchdown-intercept ratio since week 2, he's got 16 touchdown passes, only 4 picks. He's really come on, and now he's got a good matchup this week. So he's a good plug-and-play for you if you need to. You can go with Andy Dalton this week and feel good about that. Now, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Before I get into Ryan Fitzpatrick, I want to talk about a guy that we don't have a slide for there, but I want to talk about Jacoby Brissett. He plays Tennessee, who gives up the 15th most points to quarterbacks. Jacoby's really settled in nicely into his role. In fact, last 3 games, he's got 6 touchdown passes, only 2 interceptions. And he did 2 of those games. He played some very good pass defenses in Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. So we don't have a slide out there, but Jacoby Brissett's not a bad play this week. Let's go to Ryan Fitzpatrick. He played adequate today. He had 275 yards and 2 TDs. And it sounds like Winston's going to be shelved for at least another week, if not more. And now Tampa Bay faces Atlanta. Now, Atlanta's solid against the pass, but what I'm going to imagine is going to happen in this game is that Matt Ryan, playing at home against a very weak Tampa Bay pass defense, should put points on the board and force the Bucs and Ryan to have to throw more. So he's not a bad play against Atlanta. He's not a great play. He's a guy that you could roll with out there. I want to talk to you about the Miami quarterback situation. They have a great matchup on paper. Okay, now a lot of people are going to get excited. They're playing New England, who give up the 2nd most points to quarterbacks. But I want to caution you there. New England's defense has played a lot better as of late. They figured things out. I'm not surprised. Bill Belichick went back like he always does. He makes his adjustments, and of course they're clicking on all cylinders as they always do. The first 6 weeks, New England's passing game, in the first 6 weeks, they allowed 338 passing yards per game. That's what their defense allowed. Now, since then, the last 4, they're only allowing 225 passing yards per game. That's a drop in 100 yards per game passing. New England would seem statistically to be a good play, but they're not that good. They've figured some things out. They're a lot more difficult. So the Miami quarterbacks, I would say, don't have a great play, but I think they have a good play this week. Now, Cutler left with concussion, and Matt Moore came in, and Matt Moore actually played a lot better. In fact, in short time and limited playing time, he had 282 yards and a TD. At this point, Jay Cutler has been up and down. Matt Moore looked good last year when he replaced Ryan Tannehill. And we don't know who's going to play next week. We don't know the extent of Jay Cutler's concussion. But because of the way New England defense has played and the way Cutler's been so inconsistent, my take to you would be this. If Jay Cutler plays, I'd probably stay away from him. If Matt Moore plays in that game, I think he's a better play. I think he'd be more effective. He's a guy that you could roll out as a deeper play in this one. Tyrod Taylor. Well, the Nathan Peterman experiment ended today with 5 interceptions in 1 half. It was terrible. It was a nightmare. I feel bad for the coach. He's going to be criticized. I'm sure the media is going to tear him apart. Peterman went out there. First half, he was brutal. They brought Tyrod Taylor in the second half, who looked a lot better. Now, next week, they're obviously going to go with Tyrod Taylor. You've got to assume that, right? I mean, the coach is looking to get fired if he plays Nathan at this point. And so they're going to go with Tyrod Taylor, who plays Kansas City, who gives up the 5th most points to quarterbacks. Tyrod Taylor has been good this year in garbage time games. There's been a couple games where he's had some huge fantasy numbers, but it's always been when they fell behind and they had to throw the ball. Another concern that you may want to consider going into the game is he may be without Benjamin and Matthews. Benjamin left the game injured, Matthews missed the game, and so there's some question mark in terms of the weapons that will be available to him. And here's another question I have, or concern I would have for you, is Tyrod Taylor has been terribly inconsistent this year. His high water mark for points scored are 30.9 points, and his low water mark was 2.94 points. And so at times he's looked great, other times he's been horrible. Obviously, it would be great to play him and have him get the 30 points, but can you afford in week 12 or 13 to have this guy go out and only score 5 or 6 points? Probably not. So you have to weigh that risk. Joe Flacco. He's playing Houston, who'll give the most points to quarterbacks. Now, Joe has played better the last 4 or 5 weeks, but I'm not saying he's played good. In fact, if you look on the year, he's only averaged 172 passing games per game, with only 8 touchdown passes in 9 games, so he's averaging less than a touchdown pass per game. But I would imagine that if he was going to have a good game this year, it's going to be this week. Houston has been horrible on pass coverage, so Joe Flacco is a guy that if you are really desperate, you could play him. Here's some quarterbacks to avoid. Blaine Gabbert. He played a porous Houston defense this week, and he threw 257 yards and 3 TDs. Didn't look too bad. Now he faces the Jags. Stay away. Jaguars give the least amount of points to quarterbacks. They are playing phenomenal. Their defense goes after it. So whether it's Gabbert, whether it's Stanton, doesn't really matter which quarterback ends up starting. Don't touch those guys for anything. Another one I would stay away from is Mitch Trubisky. He's playing better, but one, he's still a rookie, and he still has just 4 touchdown passes in 6 games. You can't afford to lay an egg in weeks 12 and 13. Savage this week Tom Savage plays Baltimore. Baltimore is very good against the pass. In fact, Baltimore has 3 shutouts this year, so I would stay away from Savage as a quarterback. Some wide receiver consideration out there. Corey Coleman, available on 78% of the league. Let me just stop right here and say, he's a guy you need to pick up. We talked about him. He's coming off the IR. He hurt his wrist. This guy's very talented, and he's available on 78% of leagues. He needs to get picked up. Former first-round pick. Now, week 1 this year, he had 5 catches for 56 yards and a TD before injuring his wrist. Today, he returned, had a nice day. He had 6 catches for 80 yards. He has a lot of talent. He has a lot of upside. He's 5'8", his second-year wideout. And if you look at the style of play, how he is in his game, he's very similar to wide receivers like Antonio Brown, T.Y. Hilton. Another bonus for him, he's going to get Josh Gordon back soon. That means that'll take a little bit of pressure off him because other teams have to pay attention to Gordon. And right now he sits as a wide receiver 3, even based on matchup. It doesn't matter who he's playing out there. He will typically roll as wide receiver 3. He's got a lot of talent. You need to pick this guy up, especially if you're in a dynasty league. Another guy out there is Dontrelle Inman. He's available in 87% of leagues. As you know, traded from the Chargers to the Bears. And he did really well last year in limited playing time as he filled in for injuries for the Chargers. Now, the first game with the Chicago Bears as their number 1 wideout, and that's what he is. He's the number 1 wideout right now. He had 6 catches for 88 yards, and he followed that up today with 3 catches for 43 yards. Now, because he plays for the Bears and Mitch Trubisky's their quarterback, that really lowers his value. But with the right matchup, he could be a wide receiver 3. Next week, he plays Philadelphia, gives up the 11th most points to wideouts. And the one thing that we're seeing, the teams are playing Philadelphia, is Philadelphia has got a wonderful offense. They move the ball. They put points on the board, which leave opposing teams to have to throw the ball to play catch up. And so he's a guy that could be a sneaky play for you. Another guy out there that seems to have figured out this year is Jamison Crowder. He's available in 28% of leagues. The last 3 weeks, it looks like he's gotten on track. I know earlier this year a lot of people were excited. Felt like he could have a 1,000-yard season. I was one of those guys that actually thought he was going to break 1,000 yards this year and move into that lead role, especially when you look at Pryor departed and Deshaun Jackson had departed. But he started off very slow. Well, last 3 weeks, he's really picked it up. In fact, these are the line that he had. He had 4 catches for 76 yards. He had 1 game where he had 9 for 123. And then today he goes 7 catches for 72 yards. And so I think the second half of the year he's going to finish really nicely. In fact, he's got a very favorable schedule. Weeks 11 through 16 are very wide receiver friendly. So this is a guy that if he's out there, if you're in that 30% of leagues that he's available, pick this guy up. In fact, what we're seeing, I think, with him is Washington about a month ago said they want to get him more involved in the offense, and that's exactly what they've done, and it's equated to better numbers. So pick up Jamison Crowder. Another guy out there that's developed into a really fine wide receiver is Robbie Anderson. Available in 21% of leagues. He's quietly become the number one wideout for the Jets. He's had touchdown passes in 4 weeks in a row. Now he's got a tough matchup against Carolina coming up here, but he's still a guy that's really good, guy you can put on your bench, and down the stretch, especially in fantasy playoffs, he could be a huge boost to you. Marquez Lee, available in 27% of leagues. He's got a good matchup this week coming up against Arizona, who gives up the 10th most points to wideouts. He's very solid, very reliable wideout, but he has a very low ceiling because of the offense that he plays for. Here's a 1 week play for you. Mike Wallace, available in 75% of leagues. He plays Houston, who gives up the 4th most points to wideouts. He's had touchdown in back-to-back weeks. I'm not a big fan of Flacco. I'm not a big fan of Mike Williams, but he's worth a flyer if you're in a deeper league and you're desperate for a wide receiver 3. He's a guy that you could pick up who's got a good matchup this week. Rishard Matthews, available in 24% of leagues. Now he plays the Colts this week, who got up the 6th most points to wideouts. He had a big week last week. 5 catches, 113 yards, and 1 TD. Now, I think that's a little bit of a fluke. The one big long touchdown he had was on a broken play. Before that, he was held in check. But numbers are numbers, doesn't matter. He still got that. And he's had 2 TDs in the last 3 weeks. The one concern I have with him is that his targets are low this year. In fact, there's only been one time he's had double-digit targets in a game. And there's only once this year he's over 100 yards receiving. So he's got value, but temper expectations. I think Davis is going to move into that wide receiver 1 role for them, a talented rookie first-round pick. Another deeper guy to consider out there is Josh Doctson. Former first-round pick. He's starting to figure things out there. He's looking better and better. He's athletic. He's long. He's got good range. And you look at his targets have increased from 3 to 5 to 7, 2 weeks in a row. He's moving up the depth chart. Say he had a career-high 81 yards. This is a guy that you could keep an eye on. Definitely a guy you should keep an eye on if you're in a dynasty league. Here's some quick hitters out there. Now, I'm going to talk about some wide receivers that are very good that you should definitely pick up, but they're not readily available. They're available, like I said, in about 15% of leagues. So make sure you check before you go to some of those other names. Go to these names first. And if they're not available, then you move on to the other guys that we had talked about. Devin Funchess out there, available in 12% of leagues. He's taken over as number 1 wideouts. Looked good last week as number 1 guy. He had 2 TDs. Another one is Chris Hogan, available in 18% of leagues. A lot of people dumped him while he's out, but he's going to be back shortly. When he does, he's a nice wide receiver to have. Robert Woods is available in about 11% of leagues out there. Another one is Ted Ginn Jr. He's available in about 21% of leagues. Now, he has a tough matchup come this week against the Rams. Today he had a good day, but a lot of it is that they were from behind and New Orleans had to throw the ball a lot. Another one out there is Zay Jones. Keep an eye on him. Benjamin was hurt. Zay Jones has dynasty value. Another guy you can keep an eye on. Don't pick him up right now. Only keep an eye on him in terms of dynasty leagues. But D.D. Westbrook, the Jags rookie, came out today. Had his first game. He had 6 targets, 3 catches, 35 yards. Someone to watch. Don't get too excited, but keep your eye on him. Some tight ends out there to consider. Well, Adam, tight end for Chicago. Well, as you guys know, Miller, his year, had a terrible injury, and so he started 2 weeks in a row, and he's looked good on 6 targets. He's got 6 catches. Today, the rookie tight end went out and had 4 catches, 44 yards, and a TD. If you look at Chicago, if you look at Trubinsky, they like to use their tight end, so he's a sneaky pick down the stretch as a guy that you could probably use. Another one you need to keep an eye out there is the Washington tight end situation. They love to feed their tight ends consistently. Cousins love to use their tight ends. You look at Reed, he's available in about 33% of leagues. Now he was out. It was questionable whether or not he was going to play, and then I'm sitting him, but he could be back next week, and if he is, he's a guy you need to pick up in start. If not, Vernon Davis is available in 30% of leagues. Now, Vernon Davis has been really good. 5 of the last 6 games at over 60 yards. So whichever tight end ends up playing, you keep an eye on that. Watch as the week gets closer and start one of those guys, and you're going to have yourself some pretty good production there. Guy we talked about earlier, kind of talked about briefly, Ricky Seals-Jones. The Arizona rookie from Texas A&M went out, had 3 catches, 54 yards, 2 TDs. Actually looked really good, but once again, that was the only production. We need a bigger sample size before we get too excited about this guy. So no, don't pick him up. You can put him on your watch list if you want. Some defenses. Now, as I took a look at some defenses, they're getting picked over pretty good. Other owners are getting smart about grabbing defenses and forecasting a little bit and looking ahead. So there's not a lot out there, but here's just a few to consider. I'm not going to talk about the top defenses that are not available, but here's some that are readily available. Cincinnati plays Cleveland coming up. Bengals are available about 60% of leagues. They've been doing better. They're producing in terms of fantasy numbers on defense. Atlanta versus Tampa Bay, available in about 85% of leagues. The Latches coming off their 8-sack performance against Tampa Bay right now. That's kind of a mess. That might be a good play. And then another thing you could do is I looked ahead to Week 13. A great defense out there for Week 13 that's available at 65% of leagues is the Chargers, who played Cleveland. And the Chargers are starting to really step it up on defense, so they're something that you want to consider. So those are a few waiver wire names for you to consider. Would love to hear your feedback. Any other questions? Once again, thanks for joining us at FFP. God bless and have a good night.